I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Vanessa, I'm glad we're having this conversation today because the one thing that I hear from all the people in the industry is they say, Vanessa, I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she does what she does. She seems to be able to do everything. I don't know if she has a twin or what. So what's going on here? Why are you able to do what seems to be so many different things in the industry that everyone is wondering, how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. I don't know myself sometimes, but I can tell you this. I have energy for what matters to me. And I think that that has been, over the last few years, my guiding principle. Like, what really matters to me, what's meaningful. And that helps me make decisions about yes, no, maybe so.
Talk about from a couple of years ago, if you think about the protests summer 2020, when a lot of this movement really got a lot of publicity, got a lot of attention around it. How do you do things from a corporate perspective that don't appear to be sort of that overly corporate thing? You know what I'm talking about? When a lot of
Yeah.
people, they're sarcastic, they're cynical, and say, hey, these companies, they're just doing something to make it look like they're doing something, but do they really care? So how do you find that balance of, we want to do the right thing, we want people to know that we're doing the right thing, but we don't want to be so overt and blatant that it rubs people the wrong way, and then we get backlash because maybe we went too far into the optics.
That's so it's so important, so timely of a question, Eric. What it reminds me of is that people make companies, and the talent in those companies is responsible for every decision and how it shows up. Every single person matters. And if I think back in my career, I've worked with Visa over the years. During the Olympics, it was 2014. LGBTQ was a major issue at that time during the Olympics, making statements that mattered. That's just one small example. If I think about a few years later, I was working with the Dell business. Dell had pretty much needed to make very important relationships with women in business, and I was responsible for working on something really special called the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network, and that actually still goes on today. It's a network of thousands of women who are trying to grow their business and are looking for technology advice. Think about that. When you're not even in the conversation and then all of a sudden you are, companies have so much responsibility. So the people that work there have that responsibility, not the brand, the people. And that's really been the guidance for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I try to remind people of that. Companies are people, right? Governments are people. Like everything, every organization is still made up of people, and those individuals have to make decisions, or committees or groups, but it's people that make decisions, not a company or a government or an organization. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's so important. I do wonder at a older company, but a company that's had a history at 83 years, a company that's not a brand new startup, companies that have a long history and a reputation, like this is how we do things. And there's probably people working there that have been there for 30 years. They've been there their entire career. And then there's people that are newer. How do you find balance? How do you find consensus? How do you find agreement among people with different perspectives where there's decades of experience that go with it? And it's hard to just say, okay, starting tomorrow, we're all going to do this now.
Yes. Alignment. That sounds like what you're getting at, Eric.
Alignment. Yeah,
Right.
that's the word. There you go. That's the word.
The quest for alignment. My experience has been that, again, when you are part of a company that's based on people, your responsibility is to build relationships. And those relationships are essential in building consensus. And at some point, there will be a decision date. There will be a time when a decision is made. And once that's done, the debate is over and everybody falls in line, alignment.
Whether
So,
you like it or not, you got to fall in line at that point. Yeah.
I think the thing that has been really important to me is that, are you in the room? Is anybody listening to you? And if those two things are happening, you're more than likely going to feel that you've done all you could.
As in you, like, is Vanessa in the room? Are people listening to Vanessa in terms of
Yes.
like, in terms of measuring what you're able to do from your role, from your job?
Yes. Everybody comes in with an agenda. a personal agenda and a professional agenda. You are hired to do something really important, and you also have values that you want to stick to as well. And when those two things intersect and you're able to push business forward as a result and feel as if your integrity not only is well intact, but you're able to make change, make a difference, that's magic.
So you've been out for all of a few days, all of 1 week. Yeah, measured by your watch, exactly, right? It's probably closer to hours than anything else. How are you spending this time off then? Are you working on the next project? Are you taking total time off? Are you just spending 3 hours a day at the gym? What does someone do who's been so driven, so accomplished, so busy, global companies working all around the clock? What does someone do now when, oh, I don't have a manager today. I don't have that 7 a.m. international call and that 9 p.m. international call.
6 a.m. I'm on Pacific time.
What time are you waking up for those 6 a.m. calls? Is that just 5:59 alarm and roll out of bed and the phone's there? That's why I don't like Zoom. I don't like these video things because now I gotta get up so much earlier to look the part. Where if it was just on the phone, I could kind of get by.
That's a whole conversation on its own.
That's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
You know how I'm spending my time. The pandemic was actually quite helpful in rethinking time, how it's spent. And I was already getting more and more practiced at this as I have a family that is really active. I have 2 teenage daughters. There's always something going on. And, so I've had lots of time to think about the best ways to manage time. And so whether if it's something for myself when everybody's asleep, that was usually my go-to in the olden times when my kids were little. But now, now with the pandemic as well, I just think about time completely differently. And I feel like you can stretch it and you can compact it and you can compartmentalize it in ways I think that are most advantageous to me.
What are some examples? Obviously, not commuting is sort of the standard one for a lot of people the last couple of years, but what other time things are you talking about? Because I love talking about time. My wife, if she heard this, would be rolling her eyes like, oh, here we go. Eric's time efficiency things. Here we go. So I want to hear more about this.
The time in which we do things, the deadlines have changed. Here's an example, even with my kids. They get deadlines. They have midnight deadlines to turn things in now. Who has that in school?
As opposed to like you bring it to school the next day at 8 a.m., like a piece of paper comes with you at 8.
Exactly. So
midnight. There should not be a midnight deadline. It should be like 9 p.m. So at least it sort of forces you to like get it done before you go to bed, not midnight.
Again, this is a whole other podcast because they're operating on a different timeline completely. Like they roll out nighttime, that's their time.
Right.
But for people like me, I like to get 8 hours of sleep. I do. I like to stay engaged on certain things that I care about most. If I'm waiting for something, if you had a package at my front door, I'm right by my front door right now, or if I'm, working on a project of any kind, time is what I heard this in a movie. Time is a construct. You can make it what you want. And I think what we're really talking about is setting expectations, both with myself and with the people I work with and friends with, making plans with.
Make it what you want. I'm thinking about that one because a lot of time, but it's not yours. I mean, I guess as the pandemic allowed for a little bit more flexibility, but when you're working these jobs, right, you've got clients. If you're on the agency side, you've got clients. If you're internal, you've got a whole other set of stakeholders. Hours are not yours in terms of what time things are happening. Travel's not necessarily, like a lot of things you can't control. So how do you, not say force the time to work your way, but how does someone who is not the CEO, but is somewhere in the chain of, okay, I'm not the absolute top person and I've got responsibilities to people below me and above me in places in many time zones in many countries. How do you keep that time? How do you control that time for yourself to do things efficiently the way you want to do it?
Well, first of all, giving myself a little, what are they saying more and more these days? Giving yourself grace to say, not everything is going to go as planned. I think the rigidity, you and I talked about this a little bit before. There's a lot of rigidity, especially in the PR profession. It has to be done this way. It has to be done on this time. And a lot of times that's true. We work on deadline. Totally true. But I think there are other things that are more fungible, more malleable, that could be done at other times. But because we have made it so, we keep the same habits. And it's rethinking about what those habits, really reflecting on what those habits are. Let me give you an example of me. So I told you before that I wake up before everybody else. That I still do.
But you want 8 hours of sleep. So are you going to bed before everyone else too? How does that work?
Yes. Yes. Unless I'm watching a K-drama that goes much later, then it's a whole other conversation. But what I do, I'll wake up. In my family, I am the first one to wake up, and my responsibility is to make sure that everybody else gets up. That's just a thing that I've taken on. I want to do this. I'm not going to be able to do it forever. This also means that I'm able to respond to some things first thing, things that matter. And whatever that is to me for that morning, I take like 15 minutes and think about it, drinking my first cup of coffee, making those decisions. Then put everything away. My dog gets walked 3 miles every day, almost. Now,
3 miles by you? You're walking your dog? Because that takes an hour. It's an hour to walk 3 miles. 45 minutes, maybe.
Yes, 45 minutes, pretty close.
Yeah.
And think about what we would spend that time on before, commuting, or everybody's got a similar story. And the being outside made a huge difference to the way I thought about every other decision that I had. So if I'm working on something, for my job, when I was at HP, I'd have deadlines at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, because that's the nature of the work that I do or did. And now I use that time differently. So that's
I like those examples. Were you on the dog walks for that 45 minutes? Are you writing back to emails during that, or is this just a pure walk and just thinking?
It's filled with Peloton. and actually, that's another thing. I'm a huge fan of small achievements, small victories.
Like how small?
Consistency in my Peloton calendar. I think I'm definitely over a year consistent.
Like every single day you've done it?
Yes, but that doesn't mean... Wait, say again?
Like 365 days straight, like you've hit it at least, you got on the bike every single day for at least a year.
No. The media Peloton means you can do meditation, means you can walk, means you can get on the bike, means you can, there's lots of options.
Okay.
And so again, in the before times, I was very, I think I had 5 gym memberships at one point.
What? Yes. 5 gym memberships?
Oh, yeah.
That's the most I've ever heard. 5 gym memberships is the most. That's a new world record in my book. I'm a big gym guy. I like the gym so much. I turned my garage into the gym. We don't have a garage. We have a home gym that no one is allowed to put anything in. So I want to hear about these 5 gym memberships.
A couple of them were actual gyms. A custom gym. It was based on geography, wherever I happened to be. My job was in Palo Alto. I needed to have something down there. So I would go to Soul Cycle, Barry's Boot Camp. That's 2 gyms right there. Then by my house, I have a small gym that's, in walking distance of my house. Then I had another, with boutique gyms, you could have 1 million.
Right.
So geographically, if I was stuck somewhere and I got out of work at a certain time and I knew traffic was going to be bad, great option. I don't have that anymore.
How many gyms you got now?
Peloton. That's it.
Okay. So is that the pandemic changing that type of thinking then? Forcing a different way of doing things?
Yes. And also, I had, back to rigidity, I had a mindset that you had to do certain things in order to achieve a feeling of success. I have completely changed my mindset on that, especially on days when we were in strict quarantine. Mm-hmm. When back in the days of strict quarantine, it made it really easy to feel like a victory was getting outside and walking the dog for
opening the door.
Right. Going to the store was a stressful experience not that long ago, and still kind of is.
Yeah.
So there are bigger things to worry about than whether or not the right kind of workout happened.
So getting rid of rigid thinking, something that you've done, it's changed for you the last couple of years. Is this something that you're not saying evangelizing to others? Is this something that you want others to hear that message of, hey, like I want you to change your thinking too?
Yeah, I think the message really is a question. What's holding you back? What's the worst thing that could happen? I find that when I ask those two questions of myself, I don't really have good answers a lot. Like they're not diabolical problems that, can never be resolved. And when I have an answer that I really feel good about, when I ask myself that question, what's the worst that could happen? Doing this podcast, what's the worst that could happen? I'm
Worst
more
case,
likely
yeah,
to say
we can
yes.
come up with some worst case scenarios, right? There's always a story in the newspaper if somebody said the wrong thing on a podcast and then they lost their job. I guess if you're in between jobs, you're okay right now. So
I would say that's actually not true. We're gonna have to talk after this.
But I think you're right. I think, and more seriously, especially in this world, right? The PR world, the tech industry, there are a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of serious meetings about things that have to happen. The stakes are so high. But if you just look back perspective wise a little bit, all right, if none of this happens or if this all goes wrong, nobody's going to die. Everything's going to be fine. Like maybe a few dollars get shifted here and there, but it's not really the end of the world, especially when you see what's happening in the world today. It gives you perspective on what's really the worst that could happen in a lot of these things.
One of the an experience I had that really brought that home was right in the middle of 2020 when it was pretty serious and schools did not have any answers at all about how to get technology to kids. Working, our company, like with many others, worked with the state of California to make sure that laptops were getting into kids' hands. There were lots of things that were needed. This was something that our company at the time was focused on. And when I think about the amount of time, how fast things can move when something matters, I feel very proud to know that I can work at that speed. So using
If needed,
judgment
when
and
you need to work that fast.
that's right. That's right. And to be really cognizant of when it's not necessary.
Yeah. Because I think people are moving that fast all the time instead of saying, okay, these are the things that really we need to speed up on. These are the things we can go back to. We can shift down a gear, but we don't always need to be in the highest gear all the time.
You just described hustle culture, which I think PR people are, it was already part of our DNA to be that way. And as corporate versus agency, I think there's less and less difference. Everybody is all about whatever is about to happen and they want to do it in the fastest amount of time and be first and be best. And when you have the mindset of first and best, which I'm a big fan of first and best, they're great for PR. But at what expense? And that is something that I think over the last few years has been really important for me to consider. At what expense?
What do you tell younger people looking to grow in the industry? You've had experience on all sides of it, right? In-house, agency, big companies, smaller. What do you tell some of the younger people who are saying, okay, I'm trying to figure out my way here. I don't really know, how do I navigate this?
Well, nobody has all the answers ever. So if you feel like you don't have any answers, that's actually okay. The thing is, what do you do? What are you going to do about that? And the thing that has been really important to me over the years when I have had questions almost literally every day at every stage of my career, you need to have people who are there for you. And that can be, there are so many people, but I think one thing that's helped me personally is industry work and doing industry work alongside my day job has, not only gives you energy, I know that's surprising to say, considering it's more work and you feel like you're overworked already. And
That's exactly what I was going to say is, aren't you busy enough from the job? Because if the job hears they say, well, if she has all this free time, then we're not giving her enough work to do. She can make time to do all these other things. So you got to my point, which is, aren't you busy enough? How is doing more work, probably for free, really helping you get by? So I am curious. I mean, I know what you're sort of saying, but I'd like to hear it a little more explicitly.
Well, I want to make sure too that we're acknowledging that the up and comers in the PR industry are used to working multiple jobs. You know, everybody talks about the gig economy, but if you go to Upwork and you look at what's on there, all the talent on there, highly likely there are people who are doing something part-time already. And I've actually had the pleasure of working with interns who are already influencers in their own right.
I'm glad you said it, because so I'm 38 now. So it's like, I used to think I'm young, and then I sort of thought I'm old. And I think I'm sort of in the middle now of that. Or if you say someone's working from 22 and for 30 years, let's say I'm right in the middle. And you're right. I've noticed this thing. People in their 20s are the ones coming out of school. They're already influencers. They already have a few gig jobs.
Yes.
They've got their full-time gig plus I got
Yes.
my 200,000 followers on Instagram and I make money
Yes.
doing that. Plus I have a full-time job. So I'm glad you said that, because I had noticed that too. And I was trying to figure out if this is the norm or just the people that I was running into.
It's normal. And I think if you look even, you know, at the young kids that are coming up that are not out of high school yet, they already have businesses. So when you think about it in those terms, they're just creating a portfolio of work.
Right.
And
right.
I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I'm a Gen Xer out in the street. I'm saying it, of course. I'm a Gen Xer. We were taught by our parents that you have one job and you have that for life. And then you realize that's actually not the way the world works. And I think it's been freeing, especially for people, I think in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I actually have somebody I'm working with in the industry who's over 70, like still making it happen. And so you're not limited in any way. And I think that is what I've been learning from the up and comers in the industry. They are changing not only the way we communicate, but they are changing the way how we should be thinking about business in general, how we should think about career and appreciate it. And I'm all about it.
Does that go back to then what you were saying earlier, how doing some industry work has given you more energy? Even though it's more work, it's giving you more energy. Is it because you've been meeting with these types of people? Is it because you've been seeing, like, here's all the other ways that things can happen, and there's a little bit of a youthful kickstart to your energy, seeing what the younger folks are doing?
Absolutely. Reverse mentoring is a real thing. And if you're not
Reverse
doing
mentoring.
it,
I've never heard that phrase before.
yes, do it, do it, do it. So I have mentees, but they also mentor me. And if you look at the best in our industry in PR, marketing, advertising, those people are all enthusiasts and they all have reverse mentor situations for themselves. It's one of the best ways to stay on top of things and have some fun while you do it.
I like that idea. I need to find myself a reverse mentor. That's what I got to find. Get myself a little more hip and youthful.
I think isn't Bospar one a very youthful agency?
That's true. Yeah. That's true. I feel like the old person there now. So, right, but that is part of it. Like, even just within the Bospar community, it's like, all right, a lot of people in their 20s and they're really good and they're really smart and they know their stuff, but they know things that I don't know. They know completely different categories and different experiences. So you're right, just leaning into that and realizing the talent level and the knowledge level that's already there. And you're right, it's pretty impressive.
It is. And it's our responsibility to make sure that it has a platform. So back to the room. Who are the people in the room? What's being discussed in the room? And then, that to me creates a much more meaningful interaction and the outcomes are going to be better. I'm probably going to like it a lot more. And a lot more people that I am part of their networks are going to get great opportunity. That's awesome.
Because I'm curious, I'm curious again about these next steps that you said, watch this space, rule out some things that you're not going to do. So at least when, okay, she's not going to go work for this in-house place or this agency, or she's starting her own thing. Like, is there anything you can rule out for us?
What I can tell you is it's happening in April.
It's happening in April. Okay. Okay. That's not bad. That's not bad. So we're deadline driven. Like we go back to the beginning of the episode, right? We stick to deadlines.
Yes. Well, you gotta have space in between.
Right.
And that I think is, also this conversation is fun in that way where it doesn't feel like work. Is it? Is what we're doing work right now?
I don't think so.
I don't either.
You make it easy. What are from your perspectives when you look at some of the bigger companies right now, especially, right? Just look at this week, right? The stuff in Europe, the stuff in Florida, right? There are touchy things that companies can say the wrong thing, say the right thing. Are there companies that you look at as these guys do a good job? Like I'm impressed. I'm always impressed by company X, Y, or Z. Are there companies that you look at that you think they always seem to screw this up? They always seem to always get the wrong side of the message. I'm sure from your neutral point of view, you have some winners and losers in your book. Like if I were in charge there, we wouldn't have done it this way.
It's easy to talk about the winners.
It's easier to talk about the winners. Yeah.
It is. The losers are already out there. This week is a good example. Just, all you have to do is scroll. Yep. And also we got to talk about this in terms of cycles. A brand can, all it takes is a minute, and a brand can lose all the trust that it's built over decades and decades. And you've seen that, I think, in the news business quite a bit too, where, if you're really thinking about the communities that you serve and the people that matter to you, a brand that comes to mind so quickly is a Patagonia. Consumer brands maybe have it a little easier, but none of this is very easy, in that if you are sticking to your values, I mean, look at everybody who's pulled out of Russia over the last few days. It could be said that's awesome, that people are doing the right thing. It could also be looked at in the opposite way, which is why'd they take so long?
Right. You can think you're doing the right thing, and then you get blowback because all of a sudden the optics change and it looks like you did the wrong thing. Anything that was good should have been done faster. Right. It's a tricky balance. It's a good point.
It just is another underscore that people that do the jobs that we do have some of the toughest jobs that exist, because if I think about each of those decisions, they are hard fought consensus. It's rare that there is single choice. Actually, an interesting study right now is to look at what United is doing. United, one of the first, if not the first, to mandate vaccines, now is allowing, I think as of this week, allowing people back to work.
In the newspaper today, just saw a big headline in the Wall Street Journal. Hey, they're bringing back the unvaccinated. That's a big shift from where we thought we were a few months ago, and court cases and federal mandates and people getting fired or quitting jobs in different industries. Right. It's a big 180.
Yeah. Again, though, every day we see parts of stories. And I think that's another thing that people that do what we do, multiple sources matter. Thinking about reflecting on what a brand did back then at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, their vaccination rate was somewhere in the 90s. So are we really talking about boosters here? Those kinds of questions are questions that our teams have to think about every day. And my heart goes out to everybody who's dealing with it right now while I am on vacation.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably a good place to end it. My heart goes out to them as well. I'm glad that my roles are not exactly those roles, trying to figure that out on such a public, visible, global, polarizing scale. The people that do that work, all the kudos to them, because they're not getting paid enough for some of the hassle and stress and the blowback. No matter what you do, no matter what decision you make, millions of people don't like the decision you make. So that's tricky.
Yeah, it's I I have so much respect for people in our industry that are there with integrity and doing the right thing, and every day making calls that are painful to make.
Yeah. There are not enough gym memberships that you can buy to get rid of your stress in a 24-hour period with some of those jobs.
No, no. But we got to have, you got to have some sort of balance in your life to be able to be with your family. You have a growing family, like that's what this last few years, at least for me, has reminded me that, your work is not your identity. And I think many people who are in these roles right this minute, heads of comms roles, dealing with really challenging issues, might just have just a few more minutes than they did in the before times to be with their family. And maybe that's the deciding factor to keeping going.
Yeah, maybe. Vanessa, really eye-opening conversation. I appreciate the time today, and I look forward to watching this space in April.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.